We are commencing legal action against Mrs. Meghan Markle. Her televised allegations, particularly the Oprah interview, have inflicted undue harm upon the royal family. An apology no longer suffices. The matter will now proceed through the...
Meghan expected resistance. She may even have expected cold smiles, cautious glances, and the familiar chill of palace protocol. What she did not expect was to reach the entrance of Buckingham Palace and discover something far more brutal. Her name was simply gone, not crossed out, not delayed, not marked for review, gone entirely from the guest list, as if the Duchess of Sussex had never been expected to arrive at all. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Meghan stepped toward the security checkpoint expecting a routine confirmation before entering the private royal reception. Buckingham Palace, the ceremonial heart of royal life, was hosting senior royals, dignitaries, and selected guests. Two officials checked the list, exchanged a look, then checked again. That hesitation told her something was wrong before anyone spoke. A senior security officer finally faced Meghan and delivered the sentence that changed the evening. Her name was not on the authorized entrance list, the final document used to decide who could pass through the palace doors. She could not be admitted. Harry's name appeared on an internal notation, but hers did not appear anywhere. Meghan stared at him, convinced this had to be a simple clerical error. The answer made it worse. The officer explained that the list had been personally reconfirmed that morning. Meghan's face tightened. "Who approved this?" she asked. He would not say. Harry immediately stepped forward, anger rising as he insisted his wife would not remain outside while his own relatives gathered inside. Meghan stopped him with one hand. She would not give the staff the spectacle someone might have expected. Then an aide said too much. A revised guest list had been issued only hours earlier, replacing a previous version on which Meghan's name had appeared. This was no forgotten invitation. Someone had made a decision, removed her, and sent that decision to security. Harry demanded to know who authorized the change. The aide refused, then disappeared through the palace doors carrying word of the confrontation inside. William received that message within minutes. The prince read it once, then again, and stayed silent. He did not order security to admit Meghan. He did not send any immediate explanation at all. Outside, Meghan felt embarrassment harden into suspicion, while Harry realized the problem was no longer the door in front of them. Someone inside Buckingham Palace had decided she should remain outside. And while Meghan stood only feet from those doors, the people behind them faced a far more dangerous question. Who was prepared to take responsibility for keeping her out? The guest list may have been nothing more than a sheet of names, but behind one missing entry stood years of resentment, loyalty, fear, and unfinished family business. Meghan saw humiliation. Harry saw betrayal. William saw a boundary that could no longer remain blurred. Charles saw something even more painful. A family conflict that had escaped private rooms and reached the front door of the monarchy itself. Meghan understood what entering Buckingham Palace would mean. The palace was not simply a residence. It was the symbolic center of the sovereign's public life, the place where royal duty, ceremony, and family identity often collided. For her, crossing those doors would signal that, despite everything that had happened, she still held some recognized place within the family. Being stopped outside turned that symbolism against her. Harry felt the insult differently. He knew palace protocol, the formal rules that govern access, invitations, and behavior around royal events, and he understood why names mattered. But he also knew what it meant for his wife to stand outside while relatives were welcomed in. His anger came from loyalty, but underneath it sat something more painful. The fear that his family had decided Meghan could be excluded, without even telling her directly. William read the message in a private reception room and said nothing at first. The prince tightened his jaw, set the note down, and refused to react in haste. For him, the issue was larger than Meghan alone. If a royal invitation could be challenged at the entrance, then every controlled arrangement risked becoming negotiable. Yet he also knew that Harry would read silence as hostility, and that knowledge made the moment heavier. Charles received the news moments later and asked whether his younger son had entered. The king, meaning the reigning monarch and head of the royal household, sank when told Harry refused to come inside without Meghan. He wanted his son near him, but reversing the order now would expose division at the highest level, and undercut whoever had approved the final list. Anne had warned that this crisis could happen. Princess Anne had argued privately that uncertainty around Meghan's status was dangerous because ambiguity invites confrontation. Either she was included or she was not. A courtier then let slip that Meghan's attendance had been debated before the final list was approved, proving the omission was known before she reached the palace. Harry seized on that detail immediately. He began demanding names, asking who had joined the discussion and who had supported the change. To understand why Meghan's name vanished that morning, the story had to move backward, to one private exchange that changed the atmosphere inside the palace completely. The decision did not begin at the palace gate. It began several days earlier in a smaller room, during a conversation that was supposed to settle arrangements quietly. Instead, one sentence hardened positions on both sides. Those present would later look back on that private meeting as the moment compromise disappeared, and the point at which Meghan's return to Buckingham Palace became something far more explosive than a simple family visit. Palace officials were finalizing a royal reception, and every detail mattered. Seating plans, arrival times, press access, and private family contact were being controlled, because one misunderstanding could turn an intimate gathering into a public crisis. Meghan had initially been included alongside Harry's expected attendance. The final guest list, meaning the approved record used to determine who could enter the event, had not yet been locked. William and Anne understood the danger before anyone said it aloud. The prince worried that different expectations about photographs, private rooms, and access to senior royals could create confrontation. Princess Anne, known for blunt discipline, agreed that no guest should arrive believing one set of rules applied to them, while security operated under another. Both knew the evening carried emotional weight, because Harry's presence alone could reopen old family wounds. Harry then made the statement that changed everything. During a private pre-event conversation with a senior palace representative, he said Meghan would attend beside him whether or not separate written confirmation was issued. The representative answered that every guest required independent authorization. Harry pushed back immediately. His wife, he insisted, would not be treated like an optional attachment to his own invitation. The message reached William while he was meeting with Anne. He read the documented account, set down his pen, and said no one, not even family, could decide their own access to a controlled royal event. Anne did not soften the problem. She argued that ambiguity was now more dangerous than exclusion. Either Meghan should be formally approved, she said, or her name should be removed before the final list reached security. That recommendation became the turning point. After another round of discussion, officials issued a revised list without Meghan's name and circulated it to the palace security team. The change was deliberate, recorded, and enforceable. Yet the most damaging step never happened. No direct personal message reached Meghan before she began traveling to Buckingham Palace. Harry understood that omission only when he stood at the gate. His anger shifted from confusion to accusation. If the decision had grown from that earlier exchange, he wanted William's answer directly. What began as a procedural dispute was now becoming painfully personal, because Harry was no longer willing to argue through aides. For several minutes, Harry refused to move. Then Meghan made the decision for him. She told him to go inside, find out exactly what had happened, and return with an answer. It was not surrender. It was a challenge, delivered quietly. And when Harry finally passed through the palace doors alone, he carried with him an anger that would erupt the moment he found his brother waiting. Meghan stayed near the entrance, refusing to punish security staff for an order they had not written. The palace grounds remained restricted, meaning only people cleared on the final authorization list could move beyond restricted points. She stepped away from the checkpoint but did not leave. Harry looked back once. She told him to get the truth, not a performance. William received word that his brother was coming inside alone and dismissed the idea of sending another aide. The prince agreed to meet privately, away from the reception, because he knew another layer of messengers would only deepen the resentment. Harry entered, closed the door, and went straight at him. "Did you take her name off?" he asked. William did not flinch. He said Meghan had not been approved on the final list because Harry had treated her attendance as automatic when the palace still considered it unresolved. Harry's anger sharpened. He accused his brother of humiliating his wife at Buckingham Palace. William fired back that the humiliation came from arriving without confirmation after clear warnings that authorization had not been settled. Harry pushed harder. He demanded to know whether Charles knew the list had changed. William paused before answering, and that hesitation mattered. The king, the reigning sovereign with final authority over the royal household, had been briefed on the revised list and had not reversed it. Harry stared at his brother, absorbing the fact that their father had known that evening. William then delivered the second blow. Princess Anne had supported a clear decision rather than an ambiguous invitation. Harry had regarded his aunt as practical, direct, and less interested in palace games, which made her involvement cut deeper. The prince explained that Anne believed uncertainty would create exactly the confrontation now unfolding. Harry heard logic. He felt betrayal. Harry stood and said he would speak to Charles himself. William warned him that their father would not give him the answer he wanted. This was no longer merely a dispute between brothers. The palace had taken a position, and the king had allowed it to stand. Harry had entered believing he was confronting William. He was about to discover that the wall in front of Meghan had been built by more than one pair of hands. Every royal crisis eventually reaches the same question: who actually had the power to stop it? Harry believed Charles could end the humiliation with a sentence. Meghan believed someone had consciously chosen to embarrass her. William insisted rules had been established for a reason. Yet inside Buckingham Palace, authority was more complicated than any of them wanted to admit, and the king now had to decide whether family loyalty outweighed institutional discipline. Charles agreed to see his son privately, and Harry entered carrying the anger of what had happened outside. The king remained seated for several seconds before speaking. The royal household, the staff and offices that organized the monarch's official and private duties, had finalized the guest list after concerns about unconfirmed attendance. Charles had been informed that Meghan was excluded, and he had chosen not to overturn that decision before the reception. Harry did not let him hide behind procedure. He asked how his father could allow Meghan to travel to the palace, only to be rejected at the door. Charles looked down at the briefing paper, removed his glasses, and admitted that she should have been told directly before arriving. He regretted that failure deeply. But Harry wanted more than regret. He wanted one instruction: let her in. Charles refused. He told Harry that reversing a security decision under pressure at the entrance would turn every future palace boundary into a negotiation. He knew consistency mattered, because restricted royal events depended on clear authorization. If family pressure could erase the rule in one moment, the same rule would carry less meaning the next time it was tested. Harry then demanded the truth about William. Charles answered through their private conversation, making clear that the prince had not secretly removed Meghan's name out of personal spite. Anne had supported a definitive list, senior household officers had implemented the amendment, and Charles himself had allowed it to stand. That widened the wound. Harry was no longer fighting one brother. He was confronting a decision shared across the palace. The deeper failure was simple. Officials believed Harry understood Meghan remained unconfirmed. Harry believed his insistence had settled the issue. No one delivered the final answer directly to her. Charles admitted that gap had transformed a controlled refusal into a public humiliation completely. Then the king gave his son the final answer. Meghan would not be admitted that evening. Harry could stay with his family, or he could walk back through the doors and leave with his wife. The battle over the guest list was finished. The more painful battle was just beginning, because Harry now had to decide which side of those palace doors he belonged on. Sometimes the loudest royal statements are made without speeches. Harry did not overturn a table. Charles did not summon security. William did not chase his brother down the corridor. Instead, one man walked slowly toward an exit, while another remained behind, knowing exactly what that departure meant. Outside, Meghan was waiting, and the moment she saw Harry's face, she understood the answer before he said a single word. Harry made his choice before anyone could persuade him otherwise. He told a palace aide that he would not remain at the reception while Meghan stood outside. The royal reception, a formal gathering hosted under the monarch's authority for invited family members and guests, continued without interruption. People were still being welcomed. Conversations carried on. That contrast made Harry's departure more painful, because the institution could keep moving even while the family inside it was breaking apart. Meghan saw him return and searched his face before asking the question she already feared. They said no? Harry nodded. She looked toward the entrance, swallowed hard, and answered, "Then we go." There was no shouting, no demand for another confrontation. Her humiliation had hardened into resolve, and Harry understood that silence now carried more weight than anger. Harry apologized as they prepared to leave. He admitted that he had convinced her the attendance issue was settled because he believed family ties would eventually override uncertainty. Meghan answered that this had been the mistake from the beginning. She believed the palace had already decided how it wanted to treat her, and relying on personal relationships had only made the rejection more painful. Charles received word of their departure moments later. The king moved toward the window, stopped before reaching it, and turned away. He had defended the decision, but maintaining that boundary had cost him the presence of his son. Harry was leaving, and Charles knew exactly why. William learned the same news soon afterward, and asked one question that changed his expression completely. Had Meghan ever been formally told her name was removed? The answer was no. The prince had defended the rule, but now he saw that a defensible boundary had become an unnecessarily cruel spectacle. William requested a private conversation with Charles after the reception. The palace had enforced its boundary, but victory suddenly looked very different from inside, and that conversation would force both men to confront whether authority had been preserved at the cost of basic dignity. Hours after the confrontation, Buckingham Palace was quieter. The guests were leaving, the formal obligations were ending, and the machinery that had seemed so powerful earlier could no longer hide the human consequences. With no aides between them, Charles and William sat down to discuss what had happened. Neither believed Meghan should simply have been waved through, but both now understood that something had gone badly wrong. William asked his father for several minutes alone after the reception ended. The prince waited until the private secretary had left before speaking, because this conversation could not be softened by staff or filtered through palace language. A private secretary is the senior aide who helps manage a royal's official work and communications. Tonight, neither man wanted that buffer. The issue was no longer whether the guest list should have been enforced. It was how Meghan had been forced to discover the answer. William spoke first. He told Charles that an unconfirmed guest could not simply be admitted to a restricted royal gathering, especially after security instructions had already been finalized. The king agreed. Clear access rules mattered because senior royals, invited guests, and protected areas were involved. But both men now understood the second truth. Meghan should never have reached Buckingham Palace without knowing that her name had been removed. William admitted the part that troubled him most. He would support the same boundary again, he said, but not the same execution. The prince had defended the decision because he believed clarity protected the institution. Yet watching that decision become a humiliation at the palace entrance had changed something. What should have been a private refusal had become a deeply personal wound. Charles did not argue. The king looked down at the briefing file, then set it aside. He had known the final list. He had allowed it to stand. And as monarch, he could not now hide behind officials who had followed instructions he himself had accepted. That part should never have happened, he said quietly. Charles then made a decision of his own. Meghan would receive a direct personal communication, acknowledging that she should have been informed before traveling. The message would not apologize for enforcing the guest list. It would apologize for the way the decision reached her. William supported that distinction immediately. For the first time that night, father and son agreed on something beyond procedure. Boundaries could remain firm without stripping someone of dignity. But by morning, that careful distinction would become almost impossible to defend. Inside the palace, the family had finally found nuance. Outside it, the public was about to reduce the entire crisis to one unforgettable image. By morning, the story no longer belonged to the people who had lived it. It belonged to broadcasters, newspaper editors, royal commentators, and millions of people staring at the same extraordinary image. Meghan standing near the entrance to Buckingham Palace, while Harry spoke urgently with security staff. Whatever private reasoning had shaped the decision was instantly overwhelmed by the symbolism. A duchess had arrived at the palace, and the palace had refused to let her in. British broadcasters moved quickly, leading royal coverage with the exclusion, and turning one private dispute into a national argument. Palace protocol, meaning the formal rules that control invitations, access, and conduct at royal events, suddenly became the center of public debate. Some commentators defended the decision as necessary enforcement. Others called it a humiliation made worse by the location. Meghan heard both arguments. Harry heard only the suggestion that they had caused the crisis themselves. Buckingham Palace issued a tightly controlled statement before the morning was over. The explanation said, access to the private reception had been limited to people included on the finalized guest list, and that security staff had followed established instructions. Harry watched the coverage beside Meghan, as presenters questioned whether she had knowingly arrived without authorization. His frustration rose because he believed the attendance dispute had already been settled before they left for the palace. Meghan finally reached for the remote and turned the television off. She told Harry she would not spend the day publicly begging the institution to explain why she had been unwanted. Her anger had changed. It was no longer sharp enough to explode. It had become colder, steadier, and more dangerous. Withdrawal. Harry tried to argue that the public needed context, but she insisted that chasing approval would only deepen the humiliation. Then one front page captured everything. A London newspaper printed a photograph of Meghan outside the Buckingham Palace gates beneath the stark headline, "The Name That Vanished." Television presenters held up copies throughout the morning, transforming an administrative decision into a symbol of royal estrangement. Harry stared at the image. Meghan refused to. Charles entered the story again through a private written communication delivered directly to Meghan. The king acknowledged that she should have been clearly informed before traveling, while making equally clear that the attendance restriction itself would not be reversed after the fact. Meghan read the message once, then a second time, and placed it beside her. Silence followed. Her eventual response would decide whether this ended as another grievance or as something more final. The palace had apologized for the humiliation without apologizing for the boundary, leaving Meghan with one last choice: fight the verdict or accept what it revealed. The most important consequence of that night was not that Meghan missed a reception. It was that everyone involved finally lost the ability to pretend the old relationship still existed. The palace had drawn a boundary. Harry had chosen his wife rather than cross it alone. Charles had defended the institution while admitting its failure of compassion. Meghan now understood, with clarity, that returning to Buckingham Palace would never again be as simple as coming home. Meghan answered Charles through a private written response. The king's message had acknowledged the failure to notify her before she traveled, and she accepted that apology without pretending the wound had disappeared. From that point forward, she wrote, she would attend no royal event without explicit personal confirmation. Uncertainty had caused the humiliation, and neither she nor Harry would allow assumption to place them in that position again. Harry supported her decision. In a quiet conversation, he admitted that expecting family understanding to overcome formal royal restrictions had been a mistake. Royal protocol, the system of rules governing access, invitations, and official conduct, could not be replaced by personal expectation. He told Meghan that future contact would need clear arrangements. She agreed, and for once there was no argument between them, only the calm of two people accepting an uncomfortable truth. Charles received Meghan's reply and sat with it in silence. The king had protected palace authority, but there was no victory in knowing his son stood further away. He understood that the crown could regulate doors, invitations, and ceremonies, but it could not command affection or repair every family wound through procedure. William reached a similar conclusion. The prince still believed restricted royal events required absolute clarity, yet he insisted future exclusions be delivered privately and directly. Anne's demand for certainty survived too, but in altered form. The Princess Royal supported a rule that no senior family member should ever again discover an exclusion at a security checkpoint. Firm boundaries would remain, ambiguity would not. Meghan finally placed the palace message inside a drawer and closed it. Harry remained beside her. Neither spoke briefly. Then she said, "At least now we know." The sentence carried sadness, but also relief. The uncertainty was over. The palace doors had remained closed, but the real ending was deeper. Not exile, revenge, or reconciliation, simply acceptance. Meghan knew where she stood. Harry knew what protecting his marriage required. Charles knew kingship could not force unity. William knew authority without humanity carried a cost. The monarchy endured, but the illusion of effortless reconciliation did not. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.